The sun had just begun to rise over a quiet fishing village by the sea. The waves gently kissed the shore, and the smell of salt filled the air. The village was peaceful, with small wooden houses, narrow paths, and children playing barefoot on the sand. One morning, a wealthy businessman named Richard arrived in the village for a much-needed vacation. He was a man of great success, owning several companies and making millions every year. Yet, despite all his wealth, Richard always felt like something was missing. He believed that success came from working harder, making more money, and achieving bigger goals. As he walked along the shore, he noticed an old fisherman sitting under a palm tree, leisurely mending his fishing net. His small boat was anchored nearby, and a basket beside him held just a few fish. The fisherman looked peaceful, as if he had no worries in the world. Curious, Richard approached him and asked, "Excuse me, sir. I noticed that you came back early from fishing. Why don't you stay out longer and catch more fish?" The old man smiled and said, "I have caught enough for today. This is all I need to feed my family and sell a little extra at the market." Richard raised an eyebrow. "But if you stayed longer and caught more fish, you could make more money. You could buy a bigger boat, hire workers, and catch even more fish. Eventually, you could own a fleet of boats, open a seafood business, and become very rich." The fisherman chuckled and asked, "And then what?" Richard grinned, feeling proud of his knowledge. "Then after years of hard work, you could retire rich. You could buy a small house by the beach, wake up whenever you want, spend time with your family, and enjoy life." The fisherman smiled warmly and said, "But my friend, I am already doing that now." Richard was stunned. He looked at the fisherman, who had nothing compared to him. No expensive suits, no luxury car, no big house. Yet the old man seemed happier than Richard had ever been. For years, Richard had worked tirelessly, chasing wealth and success, believing that happiness was something to be achieved in the future. But here was a simple fisherman who had already found happiness in the present. That night, as Richard lay in his hotel room, he couldn't stop thinking about the fisherman's words. He realized that he had spent his whole life trying to impress others, showing off his wealth and chasing something that was already within reach. The next morning, he walked to the shore again, but this time not as a businessman looking for success, just as a man searching for peace. Lesson: happiness isn't found in showing off wealth or success. Sometimes simplicity and contentment are the greatest riches of all.
Once upon a time, in a vast and powerful kingdom, a young prince ascended the throne after his father's passing. At just 20 years old, he became the ruler of thousands, inheriting great wealth, armies, and power. However, he was also filled with pride, eager to prove himself as the greatest king who had ever ruled. To display his strength, he ordered golden statues of himself to be built in every city. He rode through the streets in chariots made of gold, wearing silk robes and a crown encrusted with jewels. Whenever he held court, he surrounded himself with nobles who flattered him, praising his intelligence and might. One day, the young king decided to visit a famous temple on the highest mountain of his kingdom. This temple was home to an old monk known for his wisdom. The king, wanting to impress the monk, arrived with his grandest entourage, trumpets announcing his arrival, soldiers marching in perfect formation, and banners waving high in the air. As he entered the temple, he found the monk sitting peacefully under a tree, dressed in a simple robe, his hands resting on his lap. The king stepped forward proudly and said, "Old man, do you not recognize the greatness before you? I am the most powerful king in the land, wealthier than any ruler before me." The monk simply smiled and gestured towards a small river flowing near the temple. "Your Majesty," he said calmly, "do you see that river?" The king, slightly irritated, nodded. "Yes, what of it?" The monk continued, "The river does not boast of its strength, yet it carves through mountains. It does not need to announce its power, yet it sustains life. It flows quietly, never asking for applause." The king was silent. The monk then pointed to the sun. And do you see the sun? It rises every day, giving warmth and light to the world. Yet it does not shout about its greatness. It simply does what it was meant to do. The young king looked around, realizing the wisdom in the monk's words. He had been trying so hard to prove his greatness to others, but in reality, true strength and power did not come from showing off. The monk then said, "A storm is loud, fierce, and destructive, but it fades quickly. A wise ruler is like the river and the sun, silent yet powerful, serving others without seeking recognition." That night, the king sat alone in his palace, thinking deeply. He realized that all the gold, all the statues, and all the praises meant nothing if he was not truly respected. The next day, he ordered that the statues be taken down, the gold be used to build schools and hospitals, and his rule be remembered not for his wealth, but for his wisdom. Lesson: true power and greatness do not come from showing off. The strongest people let their actions, not their words, prove their worth. Once, in a distant kingdom, there was a skilled archer named Hiero. He had trained for years and never missed a target. His arrows always struck the bullseye. His fame spread across the land, and soon he was invited to compete in an honorable tournament. The night before the competition, an old monk approached him. "Do you believe you will win?" the monk asked. Hiero smirked. "I have never lost. My skills are unmatched." The monk nodded. "Then tomorrow, aim for the target without thinking about winning." Hiero frowned. "What do you mean?" "You will understand," the monk said, and walked away. The next day, the competition began. Hiero's hands were steady, his eyes sharp. He took his stance and pulled the bowstring, but just before releasing the arrow, a thought crossed his mind. "I must win." His grip tightened, his heartbeat quickened. He released the arrow, but it missed. Shock rippled through the crowd. Hiero took another shot, but his mind was clouded with fear of failure. Again, he missed. For the first time in his life, Hiero lost. That evening, the monk found him sitting under a tree, staring at his bow. "How could this happen?" Hiero whispered. "You were not shooting the arrow," the monk said. "Your mind was shooting for victory. When you focus on results, your fear of failure controls you. But when you let go, the arrow flows naturally." Hiero closed his eyes, remembering all the times he had practiced without pressure, when shooting felt effortless. From that day on, he never shot an arrow with the goal of winning. Instead, he focused on the art of archery itself. And in doing so, he became greater than he ever was. Lesson: when we focus too much on winning, success, or approval, we lose the flow of the moment. The fear of failure creeps in and we become tense. True mastery comes when we detach from the outcome and give our best without worrying about the result. When we learn to trust the process, our actions become effortless and success follows naturally.
In a quiet town, there was an old sculptor named Elias, known for his breathtaking sculptures. People from all over came to admire his work. One day, a young apprentice, Daniel, eager to learn the art of sculpting, approached him. "Master Elias, I want to create sculptures as beautiful as yours. Please teach me." Elias smiled and handed Daniel a chisel and a rough block of stone. "Start by carving," he said. Excited, Daniel picked up his tools and began working. But after a few days, frustration took over. His sculpture didn't look anything like Elias's masterpieces. His hands were sore, and the stone seemed stubborn. "Master," Daniel sighed, "I don't see progress. My work is terrible." How do you create such perfect sculptures? Elias chuckled and led Daniel to his workshop. He pointed at a half-finished statue. Do you see this? I have been working on it for months. Perfection doesn't come in a day. You are too focused on the final result and not the process. But what if I never get it right? Daniel asked. Elias placed his hand on Daniel's shoulder. A sculptor doesn't create by force, he discovers the beauty within the stone. Every strike of the chisel, every mistake, every correction, it's all part of the process. If you focus only on the final piece, you will miss the joy of creation. Daniel took a deep breath and picked up his chisel again. This time, he didn't rush. He felt the stone, learned its curves, and let his hands move freely. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, his skills improved. Years later, Daniel became a renowned sculptor. When people asked about his secret, he smiled and said, "The beauty isn't in the final sculpture, it's in the journey of carving." Lesson: we often get frustrated when we don't see immediate results. Whether it's learning a skill, building a career, or personal growth, focusing only on the outcome blinds us to the joy and lessons of the process. Mastery and fulfillment come from persistence, patience, and enjoying the journey. When you shift your focus from results to the process, you'll find happiness in every step you take.
Peaceful village, far from the noisy cities of Japan, lived an old samurai named Master Kaito. He was once a fierce warrior, undefeated in battle, but now, he had left the path of war behind, choosing instead to teach young students the way of the sword, not just how to fight, but how to live with discipline, patience, and wisdom. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold, a young warrior named Ryu rode into the village. He was known not just for his skills, but for his arrogance. Ryu traveled from town to town, challenging the strongest warriors, winning not with pure talent, but by provoking them. He would mock them, anger them, and strike when their emotions clouded their judgment. When Ryu heard of Master Kaito's legendary past, he saw an opportunity. He marched straight to the dojo, where the old samurai sat quietly in the courtyard, meditating. "Old man," Ryu sneered, "I've defeated countless warriors. I hear you were once great, but now you're just a relic of the past. Fight, Mafe, you still have the strength." Kaito opened his eyes slowly and looked at Ryu. He said nothing. He didn't move. Ryu smirked. "Are you scared? Have your years made you weak?" Still, Kaito remained silent. The villagers gathered, whispering among themselves. They knew Master Kaito's strength, but they also knew his wisdom. Would he fight? Ryu grew frustrated. He shouted insults. He spat at Kaito's feet. He even kicked dirt at him. But Kaito did not react. He sat still, like an immovable mountain. Hours passed. Ryu, exhausted from his own anger, finally gave up. With a final growl of frustration, he turned and stormed out of the village, humiliated not by a battle, but by his own failure to provoke one. After Ryu left, a young student approached Master Kaito. "Master," he asked, "why didn't you fight him? You could have easily defeated him." Kaito smiled and asked, "If someone brings you a gift, and you refuse to accept it, who does the gift belong to?" The student thought for a moment. "To the one who brought it." Kaito nodded. "Anger, hatred, and insults are like gifts. If you do not accept them, they stay with the one who carries them." Lesson: Master Kaito's wisdom teaches us a powerful lesson about self-control. In life, we will meet people who try to provoke us, insult us, and drag us into pointless battles. But real strength is not in reacting to every challenge, it's in knowing which battles are worth fighting. We cannot control how others behave, but we can control how we respond. The moment we refuse to be provoked, we take away their power over us. True strength is not in the sword, it is in the mind.